Hola, mi nombre es Fabián
Hello,
Monisha.
my name is Faye Monisha, and today I wanted to tell you how we can greatly increase productivity when it comes to developing applications, whether mobile or web, integrating into all the development process the knowledge and the work of the design team in relation to the user interface and user experience. Nowadays, we all know that in a development team or a development process, several actors participate, not only developers, but also you have the work of designers or testers, right? And it is very important that we achieve a good integration between all of them. In this way, we can maximize the contribution of each one to the final product, which is what is being created and is going to be provided to the user, right? Today, in particular, we're going to focus on the tasks that a designer performs. It is always very important in the development process to have designers who can make the interface and user experience of our product or our application adjust as best as possible to the requirements that were given for that project and also to the current trends of each platform and each technology, right? So basically, what do we want to do? We want the designer's work to reach the user as directly as possible. The designer specifies, for example, in an interface, a user experience, and we want that to reach the user just as the designer planned. What is the problem with this? Well, that the passage from the designer to the user necessarily has to go through a developer, because the developer is the actor who actually creates the product that the user will later have on the phone or on the computer or in the cloud. So that passage between the designer and the developer, that is where we are going to focus on today. Why focus on this? Well, because this passage is where we are most at risk of losing quality in terms of what we are creating. Why? Because designers and developers use different tools. For example, designers use tools like Sketch, which is the one we're going to focus on today, but they also use tools like Figma, Adobe XD, and a few more that are on the market, while developers use GeneXus or any development tool with which they want to make their product. So the designer will create the specifications, pass them on to the developer, and the developer now has a task, which is to introduce all that knowledge into his or her tool. But that knowledge is outside their skills, their specialty, and there is a high risk that quality will be lost in that process. Not to mention, of course, that they're going to be different tools, and if there is no integration between them, there is a very high probability that there will be an overlap. That is, that the developer is going to do tasks that the designer has already seen, already solved, and already finished. And that also creates or increases even more the risk of a decline in the quality of the application or the system that we are making. So what are we going to do? Or what did we want to do in GeneXus 17? Well, to integrate the designer's tools with the developer's tools. In particular, we implemented what we call import from Sketch. Import from Sketch is going to take the result of the designer's work in Sketch, and it will import it into GeneXus in a knowledge base and create all the objects and resources necessary to generate an application that has the interface and the user experience specifications as defined by the designer, or as adjusted as possible, or as similar as possible to what the designer defined. In all this introduction to import from Sketch, there are several elements. Some are relevant on the designer's side and some on the developer's side. On the designer's side, a kind of methodology was specified with conventions, good practices to put in practice, let's say, and carry out all the designer's work within Sketch. We're not going to delve into that today in too much detail, but I do recommend watching Mauro and Damian's talk, where you can delve into these concepts. And it is also documented in the GeneXus community wiki, where you will find all of this. In addition, Also, for the designers, a plugin for Sketch is available now, with which it is possible to export the work on Sketch to a format that then will optimize the import into GeneXus. It also reduces the loss of information that may occur in the passage from Sketch to GeneXus. And what is there on the developer side? Well, on that side, in the GeneXus ID, we have a new menu option. In application integration, we have the Sketch import, where we're going to select a file and objects are going to be imported into a knowledge base. What objects are created or imported? Obviously, it depends a lot on the design specified in Sketch, but panels will be imported, which will have their user interface and also code to interact with other panels and other objects in the knowledge base. And in addition, a design system object will be imported. That will handle everything that is the aesthetics of this application, like tokens, styles, fonts, and colors, and all the necessary elements. And also, depending on the level of complexity of the design that we are importing, stencils can also be created, images will be created and imported as well. And this is important and quite useful. You may import data providers with sample data taken from the Sketch design. This will allow us to quickly prototype our application after the import and see the whole specifications of the user experience and also what the interface looks like. Well, let's move on to the demo to see this running. So I have here a new empty knowledge base, and I'm going to go to the application integration menu, Sketch import, and there I have three options. We have an option to select the Sketch file that the designer gave us with the specifications made in Sketch. Then we have an option where we say in which design system all the resources will be imported. We can, for example, use one that already exists, which in this case does not, or otherwise we have a new one that will be created. And we also have an option to import the objects as web panels instead of panels. Then I'm going to click load. And here I have a preview of all the objects that are going to be imported from that Sketch object. We have the list on the left side. We have all the panels, and for example, we see there in the view home that a panel will be imported with different layouts depending on the different technologies, with different screen sizes, either for phone or for tablet or even for web. We have a list of stencils that are going to be used on the panels. We also have a series of images, and we have the design system that has its tokens and its styles to determine the application's aesthetics. So here I click OK, and now the import process begins. In this import process, what GeneXus does is read the GX sketch file, all the specifications, and from that, it'll generate objects in our knowledge base. The images are being created, the stencils are being created. Something important is that the fonts are also imported in the design system, along with all the necessary support files. It is as if we initialize development from a very advanced point instead of an empty knowledge base. Well, there we see the panels being imported. We see that in the KB Explorer, in the tree, the whole list of objects that were created appears. For example, we have the view home. That will be the main of our application. We have the layout with all the controls. We see that it has multiple layouts for tablet, for web, for phone, and that it also has events with code to interact with the rest of the knowledge base. We see that we have a number of stencils that were created to be used in the different layouts. And we have the design system with all the necessary tokens and styles, all of this taken from the sketch file defined by the designer. We're also going to have the images, and a series of SDTs and data providers were created with sample data. With these data, we will be able to run our application too. Well, now we're going to run the application. We're going to start by selecting Android. We're going to generate the application and run it for the Android environment. And we're going to test how it runs on a tablet. I already built the Android emulator with a tablet. And now what is happening is normal development in GeneXus. Instead of starting from the objects developed manually by me, it is running from the objects imported from Sketch. So there we see that the application was run, the main screen with the necessary specifications. We see that there is a navigation towards another. Something important to take into account is that this is not pixel perfect. That is, it is not exactly 100% how we're going to release it, but we can realize that minimal adjustments are needed to have the interface and the design exactly as we need them and as they were specified by the designers. Now I'm going to change the platform without touching any objects. I'm going to change the platform. I'm going to tell it to generate for Angular on the web and using the same objects that were imported with the tool from Sketch. I'm going to run this so that it generates everything that is necessary and it runs on the web platform, generating Angular, always starting from the same objects, always starting from the same panels, stencils, and the same design system. There it is running the Angular part, and now it is proceeding to open it in the browser, and again, we have a design adapted to a large web screen of a computer, and again, I insist, starting from the same objects. Finally, we're going to run it now on the Apple platform and on an iPhone and on a phone. So we see what the design looks like in all three types of screen. There around the application, it will open in the iPhone emulator. There it is connected to the Mac to run. Yeah. And now the application is running on the iPhone emulator, and we see that we also have the expected design on the phone. The same navigation that we had on the other platforms. Now, one thing that we are noticing here is everything is fine, everything is nice, but all the data that we are seeing, the images, the titles, all this information is fixed information. It is hard-coded. It was imported from the Sketch files, but it was given as an example. And obviously our application, in it we will want to integrate it with our own data model. So in particular, the grid below, the horizontal grid, I'll want to integrate it with a transaction that I have in my knowledge base. So the good news is that the Sketch importer helps us with this because it already created the data provider for me to use on that screen. So what I have to do is simply open the data provider and replace the information, in this case, which is fixed, with variable information taken from the database. So I'm going to edit this new data provider. I'm going to remove a couple of the fixed text blocks. Now I'm going to program it to take the information from the attraction data transaction, and I'm going to assign the information from the SDT with the attributes that will come out of that table. I'll select the image of the attraction, I select the name. Here is the name. Well, now I select the country, and I write to upper so that it's capitalized. And right there, we can say that I have my whole data model integrated. The transaction was very simple, and I already loaded some data into the database. You can see it here. There are 3 attractions. And well, this is what I want to load now in the application. Running the application with the same design, but using the data from my data model. So now what we do is run the application again. Remember that we continue testing for an iPhone on the Apple platform for a phone screen. And now, well, again, I'm already working in GeneXus, so what this is doing is impacting the changes. Everything necessary to apply those changes to the application is being generated. We can see, for example, that in the navigation of the data provider that provides the data for the screen, we see that now there is an access to the database. So that's cool. It's what we wanted. It is being generated with the application, now accessing the database. The application is running there. The first screen is still the same, but now in the second one, we see that the grid below has changed and it's taking the information from the database. All those photos, texts, countries' names actually came from the application's database, that we had in our knowledge base. So briefly, we saw how the input from Sketch tool can serve us to generate, in a few simple steps, a cross-platform and multi-experience application which has integrated all the knowledge provided by the specialists of the design team. This undoubtedly allows the developer to focus on other tasks, such as data and service integration, and it brings us the best of both worlds, which makes the quality of our application much higher, and very importantly, it increases development productivity as well. So I'd like to invite you to know more about this functionality of input from Sketch, and that you try out yourselves this and obtain the benefits of quality and productivity in your developments with GeneXus. Thank you.